Hey, good morning, Men United. Welcome to our first ever online men's breakfast. We are glad you are joining us, and whether you have ever physically been present before or this is your first time tuning in and jumping in, man, we're glad you're here. Today is actually a first for all of us, though, because one, we've never been on Facebook Live and Instagram Live, and we've never had our breakfast on a Zoom call before, but we've also never had a woman co host a men's breakfast list before. So I'd like to welcome Natalie Born.
Hey, Men United.
So Natalie is the Vice President of Innovation for Territory. She's also the founder of Innovation Meets Leadership. And my favorite part about her is that she's my wife. And so what you guys may or may not know is Natalie has been involved with the men's ministry since its inception. Yep. She has listened to the dreams and the visions that God gave me for it long before it became a real thing. And then once we launched, she's had to listen to me talk about it every day of my life for years now. If you've ever been to one of our Men United events, she's always behind the scenes helping execute multiple pieces of the event. She's always helping support me. And so she is as passionate and as knowledgeable about Men United as probably any of our leaders. And so we've been talking about today for quite some time, actually. We've been planning for years about us co-hosting a breakfast together because I wanted you guys to be able to kind of have an inside scoop, a life hack, if you will, how to get inside your wife's head. and
Scary place.
Yeah. Or for you single guys, even to understand like what would a woman be looking for in a man, especially when it comes to leadership, spiritually, relationally, emotionally, all that. And so today we're gonna our topic, our subject really is how to lead yourself, your family, and your community through a crisis. Yeah. And we thought it'd be great to have it. My view, but more importantly, my wife's view, because she can tell you things that we've learned the hard way and things that she's looking for. So before we just, as we dive into it, yeah. When you guys were at the beginning of the, as we kicked off the breakfast this morning, you heard me talk about the vision of believe, belong, and lead. And that's kind of how it even works with our topic today. What you believe in your heart is going to determine what you do. It's going to determine your actions. Where you belong is going to determine, who you become, because what you identify with, being in isolation versus being in community, and so on and so on. But at the point number 3 would be lead. And I've always said this, and you heard me say it just a few minutes ago, that every man is created to lead. He leads himself first, and he leads others around him. So how does it look to lead yourself in a crisis?
Well, I think, when I work with clients, the first thing we have to do is assess the situation. So we have to ask ourselves, what's happening? What's the impact? Why is it happening, and what does it mean to me?
Yeah. So when you assess the situation, when you pause and you look and you say, what's going on? I say as a man, I would challenge you to be real with yourself, to stop lying to yourself and get rid of all the shame and condemnation. It's okay to say, I feel fear. All of us on some level are experiencing some level of fear. The question is, do we stay there and what do we do with it? So,
and as a woman, I think we're looking for you guys not to come with the answers, but for us to come to the table together and have the conversation. Like, we're just looking to have the conversation. It doesn't mean you have to know everything, but we're trying to figure out, let's sit down together and put our heads together and figure out what is the impact of the situation we're dealing with right now.
And it's probably not very attractive to you if I'm pretending that I'm not afraid when you know good and well only a fool wouldn't feel that at some level.
Yeah, and it could be fear of the virus. It could be fear of the virus impacting specific family members, or it could be the economic fear that people are experiencing, which sometimes that's bigger, from what I hear from the people I'm talking to right now, than the actual virus portion of it.
Well, as a man, we feel that pressure of being the provider and protector for our families. We sometimes look for identity and how well we can do those things. And I would say, one, we have to remember that our Father in heaven, our Heavenly Father, is the provider and protector first, and that we stand on that. And it's only through that we're even able to provide and protect at all. And there's much more than just financial provision and physical safety for protection. We have to create an environment where our family members or our roommates or those around us actually feel it's an emotionally safe place. If you're a guy who's always just flipping your lid and losing your head, like, that's not providing protection. That's not provision. That's creating
not providing stability either.
Yeah. So you can say, we know very quickly, like, oh, no one's going to touch my family, that kind of thing. but we can sometimes be the biggest threat in our own home. And I think that we have to come together with our wives and say, how can I, again, if I don't manage my own heart well, then I can't even provide and protect my family the way that God's called me to. But two, it's remembering that we are called to be faithful, more so than fruitful. If you're faithful, you will be fruitful, but you're accountable for your faithfulness. The fruitfulness is under God's control.
Yeah.
And so when we're assessing the situation, we're trying to figure out where things are, it's important to remember these truths because we have to remember at the end of the day that there's only so much we can do, and we stand on God's promises for the rest of it. And when I say face your fear, I sign every email, every newsletter pretty much with be strong and courageous, because the Bible instructs us, especially as men, over and over again, be strong and courageous. It doesn't mean be unafraid. Courage means to do the right thing, to do what you're supposed to move forward in the face of fear.
Yeah, and that to me is the second piece, which is setting the vision. So essentially, you are setting the course for what it's going to look like on the other side of the storm. And so a lot of times what families need and what wives need is for you to set the vision. So once we're through this, it's going to look like the following for our family. And one of the things that we've said as a family is once we're through this, what we've realized is we can't sustain the pace of life that we've had. So on the other side of this, we're going to choose a different pace of life that better creates the better opportunities for our family to connect with one another. So we have to set the vision, because without a vision, our people perish. And so when people don't have a vision for the future, when they don't know what's on the other side of the storm, they freak out and they become very, very fearful. And you may find that a lot of the people that you're listening to in the world, there's a business person that I've followed that does not know Jesus, and I saw their post yesterday, and they have thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers. They were freaking out, and they were flipping their lid.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at that saying, there is such a peace when we set a vision. As Christians, we are setting a vision for the future that's really beyond even this world, this earth that we live in.
Well, I even love the language you use. Set a vision, what's on the other side of the storm.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, again, this is why we're leading ourselves first. Anchor, man. What are you anchored to? There's going to be waves, you're going to be tossed and turned, but if you're anchored, you're not going anywhere. You may rock, but you're not going anywhere. And those that are tied to you, and by that I mean those that you influence and you lead, that are in your boat or they're tied to your boat, they're going to be connected to what you're connected to. And while they're responsible for anchoring themselves in Jesus as well, your influence is going to spill over. And so if you're tied down, if you have a vision for what God's calling you to, and you know what God's promises are, then that's going to be what you're standing on. And so for us, like Natalie said, our vision was we're not going back to that pace we had before. This virus can be a gift in the fact that it forces us to reassess everything.
Yeah, and it definitely has for us. And I think the other thing that you have to do after you assess the situation and you set a vision is you have to create a clear strategy. And for us, it's how are we actually going to get through this? And so one of the first things that you did is you implemented a family meeting to figure out how to get through the crisis. And so that looked like, even including our children, for those of you who don't have children or you're single, it may look like you sitting down with yourself and just saying, this is how I think I'm going to get through it. And now I'm going to bounce it off of somebody else that is wise and I trust, because strategy is all about the how. How are we going to actually get it done?
Yeah. Guys, you can do this even in your men's groups. When you're meeting with your men's small groups online, you can bring these strategies in front of your brothers and just bounce it off of each other and get some wise, godly counsel from the guys around you. You have to have at least one guy in there probably who's got some wisdom. There's only a fool tries to make it all up on his own. And I think as men, we sometimes are guilty of that. We don't want to ask for help because we don't want to look like we don't know what we're doing. But
the good news is no one knows what they're doing because this has never happened before.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's such a lie for the enemy to isolate you anyway, to keep you from getting wisdom. It's just to tell you that, don't ask, you're going to look stupid. But, anyone with wisdom realizes you look stupid when you don't ask. So
yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that there's such safety in asking, and there's such wisdom in, the Bible says there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors, and so you're able to surface probably insights from different people who have lived through different things, like 9/11, like the 2008 economic crisis. if you talk to us, you know, we lived through the 2008 economic crisis, and we've got a lot of advice because we've lived through it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's something there to when you've been through a storm, that people are better able to speak into that storm.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine the wisdom we're going to have to share with our kids and grandkids after this is over.
Yeah,
And
for
so,
real.
so you know, the next part on leading yourself in crisis is understanding the finances, right?
Yeah, so you know, it's really interesting whether you're a CEO of an organization or a stay-at-home parent, you have to understand what comes in and out of your checking account or bank account, right?
Yeah.
And so it is wisdom to sit down and assess your finances and really understand what will change as a result of what we're going through right now. And that to me is so crucial, to ask yourself that question, what is going to change? And so we did this. I mean, we sat down and started to have those conversations. We started to go back all the way to January and December and say, what did we waste money on that we need to go cancel? What subscriptions, what gym memberships that we weren't using
I was
anyway?
wasting the gym membership, guys. If you've been around for 4 years, you have seen the slope. So I need to get back in the gym. So that was a waste of money for me right now, to be honest.
Yeah.
And there right now there are things I can do at home to make. I can do like prison workouts. I can grab some gallons of milk and just start doing that or whatever. But it really is causing us to take an assessment again, assess the situation. And it's a painful conversation at times. I remember in my early 20s, that was the one thing I never did. It was almost like if I didn't look at it, I didn't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like denial, basically. And I know that many of us are guilty of that. We don't want to look because we're not going to like what we see. So we don't pick up any rocks to see what's underneath them.
Yeah.
And with our finances, when we started doing that, we realized that we had spent a ton of Amazon, a ton of eating out, just a lot of waste. And it forced us to look and come together. Again, this is a self thing, but even as a family, come together and say, what is the bare minimum that we need for our family? And how can we move everything possible to line up with that? And so when we had our family meeting, we didn't just lay down the law, this is the way things are going to be. We shared a vision with them of how things were going, of why we were going here. And we had tried to parent our kids that way before, but they were growing up differently than you and I ever had. They, you say things like turn the light off when you leave the room, and don't throw away food, don't waste it, and all that stuff. But in the end of the day, that they were still doing all those things. But when we sat them down and said, hey, right now, we need to be wise stewards of whatever God's given us, and we pray for this to end tomorrow, but we plan as if it might go on for weeks or months. And so to do that means we need to cut back in every possible way that we can. So don't wear your clothes for 2 hours and throw them in the laundry room. Don't waste your food.
Toilet paper.
Toilet paper. Yeah, like 3 squares.
It's funny. It's funny. We had that conversation, and then about 2 hours later, our 5-year-old accidentally
drop a whole roll of toilet paper in the toilet. I was like, we need another meeting.
Yeah.
So, I was like, can't you just throw cash in the toilet instead? Because we need the toilet paper. But anyway, so you have to understand the finances and understand what adjustments you have.
Yeah, and what I would say, one of the most important things to realize is that as people, we cannot waste this crisis. And so something in our lives needs to shift in this season, whether it's the realization that we can't run at the pace we were running at, whether it's the realization that we have not been spending enough time with Jesus and we need to spend more time with him, or whether it's like we need to be better at spending more intentional time with our family. This is an opportunity. Just as 9/11 and 2008 were opportunities for our country, so is 2020 right now an opportunity for us to turn back to the things we know we should be doing to lead ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, even with each other, we both work. We both have we have kids that go to school outside the home, and we both
until now.
Well, yeah, and we both had very busy jobs, very busy schedules, and so maybe for you it's you've been neglecting your parents or friendships or time with God or whatever that is. This is a great time to take an assessment. In the Gospels it talks about a wise king counts how many men he has, counts his 10,000 troops to see if he can take on his enemy of 20,000 troops. Count the cost before you proceed. So if you have not paused and taken a self-assessment, you need to say, what's in the storehouse? How many men do we have? How have I been saving my finances? How have I been treating my time and my relationship with God and others? So
and as a wife, when you are doing that, I feel safety and security. I feel safer when I see that you're taking assessment, when I see that you're taking God seriously, when I see that you're reading your word, when I see you praying over yourself and the family, like, that gives me safety and security, even in the midst of everything that's shaking right now.
And so, yeah, we honestly, we've actually kind of already moved into our leading our family through
Yeah.
crisis. But I'll go ahead and just say that from a standpoint of ordering your priorities is if we don't do that, for whether it's ourselves or our families, it's gonna be obvious to everybody anyway.
Yeah.
It's gonna come
Yeah.
out. So
Yeah.
I can either take the assessment with myself and with those around me, my family, or they're gonna bring it up to me anyway, or something's gonna break.
Yeah. And I would say, like, you know, again, when I've talked to different companies about what they're going through right now, one of the things that I see very clearly is that crisis brings clarity. It absolutely forces you to order every single priority. It forces you to understand what the priorities are, what doesn't matter anymore. And so that's part of what it has been for leading our family. We've had to take all the stuff that didn't matter off the table and focus on the 3 or 4 things that do matter, and realize that the rest was just details. And at this point in time, with what's going on in our country and in our world, what matters are the things that we have to focus on.
Yeah. I have, again, I've talked about this at breakfasts before, the difference between being a peacetime army and a wartime army. And so when I enlisted in the Marines, I joined a peacetime military. And while in training, we became a wartime military in 2001. And I would say this is a season where, as a church, as an individual, as a family, we have moved from a complacency and a comfort and a lifestyle of a peacetime people. And even though we've been at war, I mean, even for the fact that our wars were fought overseas, and a lot of us have not experienced the pain of that, and we have not felt, any kind of discipline in our lives has been pretty much self-imposed. It has not been forced on us by our circumstances, but now things have changed.
Yeah.
And again, it's a gift, because what's going to happen is it's in crisis and adversity, it's in suffering. That's how all of us became who we are today. It's through the discomfort that we experienced. And while we love being on the mountaintops, it's in these valleys and these struggles that we actually get sharper, we get more concise, we get more innovative, and we figure out everything we were doing was kind of a waste. It was a waste of resources, it was a waste of time. And when all else falls away, what is the bare minimum we need?
Yeah.
What is the mission that God gave us? And what are we here for? And so as a family, that's what we've done. We've sat down. The crisis has brought the clarity. We've had to sit down and start ordering our priorities.
Yeah, so we've ordered our priorities, and then I think us standing up that family meeting, what it did was it enabled us to have a platform with one another to provide very, very clear direction and clarity. So communicating with clarity is so important in a crisis, because we have had to tell our kids when we've snapped at them. Yeah. We've had to say, we're a little stressed right now. We need you to, go do the following. But what we're doing is communicating very, very clearly with what's working right now and what's not. So you running around making a bunch of noise while I'm trying to be on a conference call and finish a document for a client.
Post a breakfast.
Right. So we have just another level of clarity that we've had to communicate with them that we've never had before. And that's been pretty, important, just to sit down and provide that clarity. Like, this is what's going on. This is why we might be a little stressed at certain times. And this is what we're going to do to get through it.
Yeah. And that, again, none of us have been through this before. We're not on the other side of this telling you, oh, look what we did. No. We are going through this just like you, and we're just sharing some of the things that we're learning as a family, as a married couple. We're learning a lot of this stuff the hard way, It's requiring us to be patient.
It's requiring us to give each other grace. Yeah. And I think that one of the most important things that I've learned in this season is not only to give myself grace. My ideal work day has never been an ideal work day these last couple weeks. Like, it just hasn't worked out that way. But also to give each other grace. And so there's been times where, we may snap at each other, and then just being able to stop and say, hey, I'm doing the best I can.
or explain, hey, I'm stressed out over this, and I'm sorry that I'm letting it come out in this area. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't excuse it, but at least it's me pausing, acknowledging it, and us, talking through it. Yeah. Right now, with us both having kids in school, that we're homeschooling, both of us working from home, we're having to come up with creative ways. We can't act like one of us, like our agenda is more important than the other one.
Yeah, and I want to say, like, very, very clearly, if there are other men that have women at home that work, What I appreciate about you is that we have been rotating, helping our children with school and us working, and you haven't left it all on me. And there's been days where I've told you, like, hey, I've been doing this for 2 hours now, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. I need to go into the prayer room and just have an hour alone. Or I need to go upstairs and I have this email I really need to get out. And we've switched.
Yeah.
And so kind of what we've implemented is almost like rotating working hours.
Yeah.
And we've done it through a shared calendar, which we've done all along, but it's enabled me to have mental capacity
Yeah.
when I'm kind of tapped out. And I appreciate that because I think sometimes it's like, hey, women, it's your job to deal with the children and I'm going to keep doing my thing. And you haven't treated it like that. We've very much been in a partnership in this kind of crazy season that we find ourselves in.
Well, the way I've looked at it, I think, is almost like the two of you are in a gunfight, you know, and one of you's shooting while the other one's reloading, and then you reload and the other one's shooting, and they're moving forward and while you're behind cover, and then you advance while they're behind cover. And so parenting should be that way. Marriage should be that way. That we're communicating. I'm not just reloading while she's reloading because that means that, you know, we're not shooting at the same time. We have to actually communicate. So while we've always shared a calendar, now what we're doing is every night we're touching base. Talk me through your day tomorrow. What have you got going on? Where is there some flexibility? Well, this meeting may or may not happen, and if that happens, I can jump in and cover Gabby's class for here.
Yeah.
And so, again, as men, we have to be unselfish. We have to be sacrificial. We have to not just look at, is my area okay, but how can I help everyone else around me? Men, listen, while this is a joint partnership, this is a marriage, you're also the CEO of your house, which means at the end of the day, it falls on you. And so if you're a husband and father, if someone's failing, there's no one else to blame. Jump back in and help carry the weight. And so, you know, that's what it's looked like for us as far as giving grace to each other, touching base, making sure that we know what the next day is looking like. But we've also built in, come to our priorities, we've built in rest. We've built in a designated Sabbath that even though we've known we were supposed to do that forever, it was something we weren't actively doing. And so if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't happen. Yeah. And let me just go on a rabbit trail for a minute. Guys, we all have calendars. One of my pet peeves is when people say I'm going to call you or do something and then we don't put it on the calendar. Mm-hmm. I've already learned this the hard way. If it doesn't go on the calendar, it does not happen. Yeah. So if you don't have a calendar today, download one, Google Calendar, whatever it is, start using that thing. Order out your day, order out your week. It's clarity, and that's, as we always hear, that's kindness, is to let people know what your expectations are. Because if we don't communicate, we don't touch base the night before, we're going to end up in an argument the next day.
That's right.
Because there's going to be these unmet expectations and this disappointment, and that's where the majority of our fights happen in any relationship, is through unmet expectations.
Yeah, that's really good. And I would say, like, for us in this season, again, don't waste a crisis. We found a really precious gift in our family that because we're spending more time with our children, our youngest has asked to receive Christ, and we got to lead her to Christ last week, which was really incredible.
Yeah, that was awesome. We were actually just having family prayer time, and, you know, growing up in a pastor's home, she knows the Bible, she knows how to pray, she understands, you know, worship and all those things, and she's doing those things. But then, you know, we're just talking, and right before it's my turn to pray, she just asked Natalie, you know, well, what does it mean to know Jesus? And so Natalie's explaining to her, you know, we read the Bible, we tell others about Jesus, we pray. And then she's like, well, what does it mean to have Jesus live inside of me? And so we're telling her, you know, well, that's when you surrender your life, you make him the leader of your life, and you ask him to forgive you for your sins, and you confess all that. And so she, right then and there, at 5 years old, she asked if she can, you know, accept Jesus right then and there. So we do. We led her to Christ, and right there, she has the biggest smile on her face, and it was a real emotional moment for me as a father, because I know as parents, if I was to die tomorrow, I can stand in front of Jesus and say, I led my children to Christ. And so that is a gift that came out of this situation, that came out of this coronavirus. Had we been running at the pace we were at before, waking up and leaving the house at 7:15 a.m., coming back home at 6 p.m., running the kids through dinner, through baths, putting them to bed, and then starting back over the next day, and then ministry all up to the weekend. And it was a crazy pace, and it wasn't glorifying God, and it wasn't good for our kids or our family. Yeah. So this reassessment, this designated time and space for Sabbath, where we have a 24-hour time where we shut it down, man. Like, some of you guys may try to reach me during that time, and I'm just not going to respond, whereas I used to. And we're already seeing that that's become like a holiday every week for our family. We look forward to it. We have a great meal. We enjoy hobbies and rest and fellowship, and it absolutely costs us something. You sacrifice things to make it happen, but you gain so much more by doing it.
Yeah, that's really good. So the last kind of topic we were planning to talk about is leading community. So Victory has these values that I really love, and it's all about blessing others. And part of what we've been trying to figure out in the season is how to get that into our life.
Yeah, simplicity, sincerity, and sacrifice. So why do those values matter, Gus?
Well, I mean, I think like when I think about them, especially simplicity and sacrifice, what those two values do specifically is they help us be able to have room to bless other people. They also help us to have room to go through a crisis because we're not consuming everything that comes into our house. And we are setting some aside to be able to share in some form or fashion with other people. And so, I think practically in this season, as we think about how to lead in time of crisis within the community, what we're really looking at is how to avoid isolation, how to help our community, like specific practical ways to help our community, and then also how to show the love of Christ. And so for me, practically speaking, one of the things that I've been doing is I co-lead a small group, but then I'm also trying to figure out right now how to get another small group started, because I believe with all my heart that in this season we're going to see a lot of people come back to Christ that have been really, really far from him. But I also believe that we're going to see some people who have never known Christ because of the fear they're feeling. They're actually going to come to Christ and they're going to begin to know him. So really for us, simplicity, sincerity, and sacrifice, specifically not only in our finances but also in our time, so that we have bandwidth and we have time to love other people besides the four of us. It's not going to be an us four no more, but really be able to reach outside of that and love people and be able to share Christ with them. And we have to have bandwidth and time in order to do that.
And so the other two really build into this one. As you lead yourself and then you lead your family unit, then you're able to, one, be an example to those around you. And because you have saved wisely, because you have stewarded your resources, your time, your energy, your relationship with God, your relationship with each other, then you have, it's like Joseph in Egypt in the Bible, where he stored away during the 7 years of prosperity, so that during the 7 years of famine, Egypt had enough to share with those that were hungry. And so when we get those other two areas in our life in order, then we're in a place where we can give to those around us. We can be a blessing to our community instead of, I think the middle class suburban American way of life is we just take care of our own household and that's it. But Eastern way of thinking, the Eastern mindset, the Bible's teaching is that we're not a cul-de-sac. The blessings don't come into a dead end and just stop there. We're a highway. So when you understand what I mean, right? Like the blessings don't just stop where we're at. They continue to pass through. That we are an avenue that God can bless us so that we can bless other people. But we can't do that if we haven't taken the time and the sacrifice and the discipline on the front end. We have nothing to give anybody else. And what I have seen lately is a trend that many of us want to jump right into how we can influence our community. And we want to influence our community, but we have nothing to share with them because we haven't spent the time learning. We haven't spent the time growing in wisdom. We haven't spent the time in our relationship growing with God, growing our relationship with God, managing our finances. We don't even have the life experience and the experiences in our marriages to even be able to share with anyone else. We've just jumped right in.
But what you're speaking to is humility. And I think humility comes through asking other people advice. And so, and even, there's a lot of things we've been doing for a long time, but we still have people that are 10 years, 15 years ahead of us that we ask their advice. And so I believe if you're wise, you never stop asking the advice of someone you trust and respect. And I think that we cannot waste this crisis. And a lot of what we're asking ourselves is, what do I need to change? What do we need to change? And then how do I need to change the community? So in not wasting a crisis, we're constantly looking inward, looking outward, and doing that back and forth almost daily.
Well, and I think too, when it comes to leading our community, it's not just, you have to search your heart and ask yourself why. Are you doing it to build yourself a platform? And anytime you do even something like this where we step in front of a camera to talk to you, am I trying to build a platform for myself or am I trying to help elevate others? And so you can either be on the platform or you can be the platform for others. And so, I think that Jesus obviously became the platform for others, and in doing so, he was lifted up. And so I think as men, it's the same thing. If we try to step on top of our families or step on top of our community and use whatever we have to help elevate ourselves, we're going to tumble over. But if we're willing to lift other people up and let our ceiling be their floor, then we're going to be a blessing to people around us, and they're going to want to be around us because of how we bless them and how we make them feel. So, so hopefully you guys have taken some notes. Hopefully you guys have had some good takeaways. We're about to send you off into your breakout groups. And if you haven't been in community, this is a great time to plug in. This is a great time to join a men's small group online. All your excuses for being too busy just disappeared overnight. So what better time than now to either host a group or join a group? And you could actually do either one of those things by texting host group or join group to 20 30 40. And then you'll get a link that'll tell you how to go to the next step. So we're going to turn it over to you guys, and then we will be back here in about 35, 40 minutes or so to close it out. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you later.